Welcome, everybody, to Disturbing the Priest. Today, this is an episode that I have been anticipating for a while. I'm very, very excited to jump into this. We're going to be talking about the big four of doom metal. Who are they? Who should they be? What bands shouldn't be included? What should be? It's a lot to talk about here because doom metal, it's a genre that spans like a pretty long timeline. It's pretty global too. It's not like thrash metal where it's all like one concentrated scene and then, started to spread from there. But there's so many random doom bands that popped up everywhere in such a long time period. So to join me, I have a really awesome panel here. We got Merciful Mike and Butch from For the Sake of Heaviness debuting on the podcast, as well as my good friend Tommy Stewart of the legendary Hallows Eve, as well as Tommy Stewart's Dire Wolf, which is a doom metal band that he fronts and plays in, as well as Black Doomba Records, which is a doom metal label. So I'm really excited to see what you all have to say. And what we're going to do, we're just going to one at a time just share what our big four of doom metal are and kind of like our beliefs on that. And then just kind of have like an open discussion. But before we jump into that, how is everyone? You guys doing all right?
Good.
Yeah. Plenty.
Awesome.
Great
Tommy's lighting some candles. I feel like
got
we're
my
all kind of in the
candles.
mood.
Got my direwolf skull with me.
Yeah, there you go.
What could be any more doom than
That's awesome. Then like a skull,
a
real skull.
Yeah, it's the most doomest thing to do.
There is none more doom.
Yeah. It's I want to turn it into a puppet somehow and have it co-host my parts with me.
Yeah, you could do like stop motion or something with that, Tommy.
Oh, I'm not. Thanks a lot, because I am looking for ideas for the next video for the song I just recorded. That's I've always wanted to do like some stop motion stuff in one of my songs, but it's so painstaking. I've seen some bands do some really good stuff like that.
Well, hey, I say we jump right into this.
Okay.
Merciful Mike, do you want to kick us off and then we'll do Tommy and Butch?
Yeah, definitely.
So if you would just want to share your four and you can give just some reasoning and some, insight on how you kind of just put together your big four here.
Yeah, this was pretty easy for me. And I know that, all of us have talked about this at one point in time. But a lot of people do include Black Sabbath in their big four. I do not, because for me, that was the originator. They are an entity in and of themselves. Iommi, from the second the Devil's Triad came out in the very first Black Sabbath song, that was doom had been created. So I set them aside and they're on top of the pedestal. That's where it began, and there is none higher. But for the big four for me are Pentagram, which were, I believe, started off a little more on the occultish side, kind of side by side with Coven, during the day. But then once Victor Griffin had gotten involved in the band as a mainstay, and his tone and his riffs really brought in, the full blown doom sound. Saint Vitus is number two in my big four. Dave Chandler, there's not a whole lot more you can say about that with his tone as well. But I like Saint Vitus because they've got a little bit more of that streetwise doom. It's a little more gritty, a little more grimy, and it plays well into the genre itself. Candlemass would be number three. And of the four, I think Candlemass is definitely should be credited with more of the term epic doom, because they were such a grandiose, massive atmospheric sound. And that completely evolved, coming from the first album into the Messiah Marcolin era and beyond. And same thing. I mean, the riff is always the center of any doom band, doom album, which brings me to number four, which is Trouble. When you've got Rick Wartell and Bruce Franklin as a tandem, one of the greatest guitar duos of all time, in the confines of a band with Eric Wagner at the helm, and it's just a riffarama. Big, huge, thick riffs. They have to be in the big four. So that's where I come in. It's Pentagram, St. Vitus, Candlemass, and Trouble.
Awesome. Yeah. Great stuff. Tommy, your big four of doom.
Oh, Lord have mercy. I kind of felt like that. That's so funny because I thought the same thing about Black Sabbath. I thought it's a given, and it's the root of the
Yeah.
metaphoric, the tree of this kind of music. So I didn't want to include it as part of the Big Four because I felt like the Big Four and any of its smaller branches like grew from that pot. So all four of them. I mean, that's something they pretty much all have in common. And the reason I'm smiling is I've read several of the Black Sabbath books, and they all cite the Beatles is why they started Black Sabbath. And I go, so did the Beatles start doom metal? Anyway, there's a route. I couldn't debate it. Anyway, the Beatles. Anyway, I'm laughing about it because I think you have to be them then to get the why. I think it's escaped us after Black Sabbath. But anyway, I'm on the same boat. See, I would go with I think the slickest one, the best sounding, best produced of the four was Candlemass. And that's why I don't really have a number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can tell you why every one of them is so good. But I thought they came across as the best. And I remember when they first came out, because my band was touring at the very moment. We were on Metal Blade Records, and we had grabbed, I didn't hear them till the second album. So when I got Nightfall, I had it on the cassette, and I remember having it in the van and listening to it and kind of tugging on everybody's sleeve and going, hey guys. And I remember one of the guys in the band listened to it for a minute. He goes, oh, they just don't know what's going on. See, we're in a thrash band on Metal Blade, playing with other thrash bands on Metal Blade. And so that's all we're thinking is thrash at the moment. So we're not realizing that we're kind of gatekeeping in our own minds, which is something I hated about it. Later, I look back and I went, I hated all that gatekeeping that we were doing. So anyway, yeah, definitely Candlemass, but I could not get over how good it was. It was just so good, and the vocals were just perfect. It was just perfect. Anyway, so also, and speaking of the Metal Blade, it was around when Trouble started out going, and Trouble is another one that I would say, and yeah, the dual guitars in Trouble were outstanding and whatever. I don't think I really got it at first. I had it, I listened to it, and went, well, that's good. And I thought, hey, this sounds like a typical production of our time. Some of it's kind of up front, but there's a lot of reverb, and the vocals are way out there on the top of a mountain somewhere. Everything was delivered so well. But anyway, Trouble. And then I'm the same on Pentagram. I'm sorry to go down the same path, but it is true. Pentagram has the riffs, like they just riffs, and it's catchy. I mean, you wouldn't think of, when you describe Pentagram, the first thing you don't think is, yeah, they got some catchy tunes, but honestly, if you just sit and play their albums kind of one after the other, especially the first three, and when you get to the third one, that's where you start really getting catchy. But with Forever McQueen, for instance, that everybody knows. But so I spent some time lately listening to the first album over and over, and I was just like, within 2 or 3 listens, I was like, these songs were just really well written, and thinking of when they actually wrote them, because when we were hearing them, some of the stuff was really old to them. They started in the 70s, and similar to the Obsessed path, that they had a lot of demos and they did a lot of stuff, but it really didn't gel till later. But anyway, same thing, St. Vitus. I just couldn't get around it. St. Vitus is that's interesting. You called it more street smart or whatever, because I said, yeah, when you start looking at it all, I hadn't really thought about it, but yeah, Born Too Late, when they get to that, it's definitely talking about real things in your life. And Mournful Cries, same. But when you start out with St. Vitus, you're getting a lot of stuff. There's things in there about drugs, and you're not going to take it, and this and that. You get yeah, there's no like dragons and fantasies and stuff going on as much as if there are, I've missed it, I guess. Same thing. That would be my 4, but there was a point when I was deciding all this, when I was trying to decide which was more important about what would be the big 4, is who influenced modern doom metal the most from them, what lineage came down to influence this, or is it about what was proto metal? And I thought that was a kind of an ongoing discussion. It was in my head all day long for the last 3 days. I was like, well, now, which is really more important and got us here? I mean, because I could go into a whole talk about proto metal and saying Blue Cheer is proto metal, 1968. So, but, and a lot of bands say they're an influence, but I don't know that they're directly influencing the 90s stuff and the modern stuff at all. I'm not sure if they kind of got lost back there. They just weren't as talked about as the other ones. The Obsessed kind of came out with their first real album later, even though so many people say they're an influence. They're like, if I had a number 5, I might say them. I personally went back and forth with I just go on and on about Budgie and Leafhound and Sir Lord Baltimore and
absolutely
so much proto metal back.
So much good stuff.
Yeah, I like all that stuff. So
yeah,
and sometimes the nastier sounds, the less recorded it sounds, the more I like it. You just notice somebody hung up 2 mics in a room and just said play, and that's the album. And some of it, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But it still sounded good. It's the riffs. It's how it feels. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Totally.
so those are my 4. Oh, can't forget. We got to go back and talk about Which Fine General sometime too.
yeah, for sure. It's just, this is so tough because there's so many like eras and different subgenres of doom that evolved during such a long period of time. And there's especially like doom kind of originated with heavy metal at the same time. So it's just tough. It's a really tough thing to dissect, but I'm kind of there with you where I'm back and forth like the past like couple weeks of like, oh, like, do I go the proto doom route or the like, kind of second wave of doom or whatever you would call that, which is, we'll get into that. But anyway, Butch, if you want to give us your top 4, your big 4 of doom metal.
It's tough. First of all, just to jump on I love all the proto metal, proto doom kind of stuff, and I kind of look at that the way that I look at the new wave of British heavy metal leading into thrash in a way, like in metal and all the different shoot offs of metal. There's all this stuff, you had like Venom and Raven and Diamond Head and this stuff that kind of like fed into what Metallica and the bands would take and run with. So it's like really like you don't start getting into thrash until you start talking about the actual bands that ran under that banner. And I feel kind of like with the 70s proto metal bands, like even going back as far as like Blue Cheer, like it shoots off in so many directions from Sabbath and Blue Cheer and Deep Purple and Bang and Jerusalem, like into doom metal, but also into stoner rock and into just, amped up 70s sound and stuff. So it's hard to, I guess I always look at, when I think about doom, and maybe part of it's my age too, like I look at other than Witchfinder General, I look at the center of that as the 80s, and really people started using the term at that time. I think we definitely have to include, this is where it gets tricky with doom metal. There's, other than 2 bands, I don't think there's ever really been, maybe 2 or 3, there haven't been like hugely successful. It's real easy. We could have endless arguments about the big 4 thrash, but at the end of the day, there were only 4 bands that had gold and platinum records and played the size places that they played. With doom, it was never really like that. The biggest bands were never all that big. But I think for that reason, though, if you're going to look at influence and popularity, for sure. I mean, and I include these anyway artistically. Like Candlemass goes in there for sure. I mean, it covers the whole. They brought in the whole. They went from Sabbath, but there's like a. I hate to use the term power metal element, but there's that whole epic metal, epic doom thing. Kind of derived from what Candlemass did. It branched off a whole. There's so many bands in their wake that follow that, Solitude Eternus and Sorcerer and, you know, countless bands you can name, Memory Garden, and you go on and on and on. It's a whole offshoot, and so you have to put Candlemass in there. Trouble was undoubtedly probably the most commercially successful of them for sure. By the time the two Reuben records came out, I mean, even though they didn't sell like great, they were still getting radio play. They were getting on big tours, and their name was around. And they're definitely, I mean, all you have to do is like listen to the bands like that came out of like, say, bands that came out of the Maryland scene, bands, that they influence, bands like Cathedral, that were citing bands like Trouble. You have to look at Trouble as a major influence on the scene. You can hear it in the riffing still today, I think, in a lot of traditional doom metal bands. Vitus, I think, has to go in there for sure. They're at the dirtier end of doom, and I think it's where you see offshoots like, Reverend Bizarre and Electric Wizard, like that dirtier, like not as finely. I'm not saying they were, I'm not beating on their musicianship or anything, but there's definitely a difference between, like, say, Dave Chandler and Victor Griffin when it, or when it comes to like play. Like they were just like a dirtier, like less, more about the mood and the atmosphere, and it's dirty and dark and streetwise, and I just think that whether Riegers was a singer or Wino was a singer or Christian was a singer, it was like there's a certain vibe to Vitus that you can hear in it definitely carried through. And there's definitely like offshoots of that still. And then for me, I always throw Pentagram in there. I think they were the in the 80s, they were the least known of the three. They were kind of always more underground, and their kind of success, as it were, almost came later in a way, especially with the real big success for them obviously came with those Relapse records coming out, but that was like the 70s, like proto metal kind of stuff. But I think it drew more attention to the records they did with the Death Row lineup of the band with Victor and those guys. But there's no doubt, again, going back to the influence they had on bands like Dream Death and Penance and Revelation, and all the bands come, again, going back to the Hellhounds bands coming out of Maryland, or doom metal bands everywhere. For a while, the traditional doom metal sound was based on these four bands, really, that were really making waves in the 80s in that scene. There's a temptation on my part. I don't know who I would bounce out, though, but part of me almost thinks you could conceivably include Cathedral in the big four, because I think outside of those bands, first of all, they were major label bands, one of the few doom metal bands that end up on a major at any point, ended up on, when Columbia did the deal with Earache. And I honestly can't think of another doom metal band that probably drew more attention into the traditional scene than when Dorian brought Cathedral out. Again, and although they were influenced by all those bands, they brought in like that kind of deathy kind of side to things, the more brutal aspect, and then you started hearing that in, like, again, like getting into the Electric Wizards, or bands like going from more clean vocals into like a little bit of a dirtier, darker sounds. I think you could conceivably make an argument for them. They were popular for a number of years. They definitely brought a lot of attention to it. Dorian did a ton for the scene with his label. The band did a bunch of records. Brought bands to our awareness. Waved the flag of doom for a number of years until they finally called it a day. And then the other, I'll just bring this up. And it's because it starts later. I'd be hesitant to even include this. I feel like I don't know exactly. I was never a death metal guy. Let me start by phrasing that. So the doom death kind of thing, like there came a point where even today, like now you'll get into arguments about, well, it's a whole topic almost for another day. Like, what is even doom? Like, because now you can get into arguments with people. Well, Pentagram's not doom. That's just hard rock or whatever. Doom is like, the bands are pointing to like death doom and stuff, like stuff like even like they're like evoking, that's doom, skepticism, that's doom metal, like going back to the
circle
and
of
you'd
true
almost have to
doom
go back
boys.
then you're talking about Paradise Lost, Anathema, My Dying Bride, and that crew of bands in there. Like, I mean, you could have a big four over there, those English bands but I think because it came later, and without knowing their histories or knowing the guy, I would assume their influences had to come from somewhere. So I got to go back to the 80s. So I hate to like be on the same page, so to speak, but I'd have to go Vitus, Pentagram, Trouble, and Candlemass. But again, like I think you could make an argument for Cathedral, but I would be hesitant to dump any of my other four because ultimately Cathedral was inspired by that. I mean, Cathedral was like Dorian was inspired by Dream Death and early Penance too. So I don't know.
Cathedral is an easy runner.
And Revelation, so
yeah, it's tough with Cathedral because then I feel like when I was thinking about them, it's like, well, what about other band? Like, and then I started going into the 90s, and then it just like becomes how far apart do I want these bands to be? Because the issue with Black Sabbath being in this, it's like it's just so weird having one band technically from the 60s where the rest were like formed in the early 80s, arguably, technically the late 70s, but it's like it just doesn't feel right. Now, for my four here, I'm right there with you. I think it's Saint Vitus, Pentagram, Trouble, and Candlemass, because these bands like set out to become doom metal bands, it seems. Where you look at Black Sabbath, it's kind of like it's almost like accidental doom metal, where even Tony Iommi says he's not a metal band, which is like at this point, yeah, you are.
It blows my mind.
Don't tell me Born Again is a rock album. Come on. But that I feel like that's where the big four starts. It starts in the 80s, technically the late 70s, but the 80s is where like doom metal really like solidifies as a genre, because it's not like when Black Sabbath started, there were just a million Sabbath clones that were just all doing doom metal, which I'll get into in a second because I have two here. Now, I think there is a big four of like accidental doom, like proto doom metal bands that it's not like just because they have a fuzz pedal makes them doom metal, but also lyrical content. There's a lot going for them. Coven, I would not put in the big four because they didn't have that like heavy element to it. They had all the lyrical themes. If they just leaned on that proto metal sound, that fuzz pedal, they could have been arguably the first. But that's a whole debate for another day. My big four of doom, of like, initial doom, has to be Black Sabbath, obviously, NIB. There's so many great cuts on here. The title track, come on, like that same song structure is like mimicked in stoner doom today. It's such a blueprint. Next up, Blues Creation, Demons and Elven Children. It's like one record, but it's heavy, it's doomy. There's anti-war political lyrics, and there's lyrics regarding societal collapse. It's like dark, it's heavy, it's doom. it is doom. It's not technical. I wouldn't put it up there with like, Saint Vitus or Candlemas. It doesn't really compare, but like if it's on the same bill as Pentagram, it works. It's like the same kind of music. And some stuff arguably is heavier than early Pentagram stuff. Blues Creation formed in 69, a Japanese band, which is crazy because my next band on the initial Big Four of Doom is another Japanese band, Flower Traveling Band, formed in 67. This is everything, that became Doom. You have slow riffage with that emphasis on heaviness. It's not just a dude playing rock with a fuzz pedal. Like, it's written to be heavy. You have the same thing. Like, you have anti-war lyrics and themes regarding, societal collapse, and everything we see in Sabbath 1 is in Flower Traveling Band. And an early recording they never put it out. There's a bootleg. It's like 30 minutes. It's called From Pussies to Death. And it's just heavy, doomy. It's a 30-minute epic. It's like, fuck it. And Sleep ended up doing something similar. And I feel like it's like a lot of these bands have the same intentions. And I look at a band like this and I'm like, oh, they kind of have the same mindset Sleep had, but they didn't really know what direction to focus it on, because it was like stuff like this is kind of just like radio death. Like this is like, it's the worst thing you could do commercially. Satori from Flower Traveling Band, which is every song is Satori 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So dark. Satori 1 is literally like, it seems like that whole song is based on the song Black Sabbath. Like this song was written and attempted to be as heavy and as like dark as Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. And it's just crazy to see a band doing that. And like, I think that came out in like 71, but it's just crazy that you look at them on Spotify and it's like 1,000 monthly listeners, where they were like right there with Sabbath. I think to cap off my Big Four, Black Sabbath, Blues Creation, Flower Traveling Band, I'd put Pentagram in there. I think Pentagram is like the bridge between like that accidental doom and then we are doom metal now. And I know Bobby Liebling has even said like, I hate doom metal. We're not doom metal. We're heavy hard rock. But I don't know. I feel like maybe the rest of the members have something else to say about that, because it's written, especially that debut that came out in like, I think 85 initially, where the singles came out. I think the first one was 73. And you have songs written like Accidental Doom, which is heavy, it's dark. And then they transition with like in the 80s to like, we are a doom metal bit. This is obviously doom metal. Like whatever Bobby thinks about it, whatever any of the members think, if you show these records to someone blind and they don't know what the genre is, they're going to say these all sound the same. They're all dark, they're all heavy. And I think Pentagram is kind of the bridge there, but I think I think it is 100% St. Vitus, Pentagram, Trouble, Candlemas. Now, Candlemas, I was kind of back and forth with, because I'm like, it's kind of just epic doom metal. Should that be its own thing? Is it not close enough to these other bands that are kind of just like, so dark and sludgy and drony with their riffage, where Candlemas is a little more focused and epic? But I don't know. I feel like Candlemas does also, like, especially like songs like Solitude, and there's so many other songs on Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus, which is like, this is doom metal. Come on, one of the most like legendary doom records ever, and very influential as well. Just like such a great record. But like St. Vitus technically formed in 78, Pentagram formed in 71, Trouble formed in 78 technically. And I don't know. I feel like the 70s, like the late 70s, early 80s is like that's when doom metal really got that foundation. But yeah, I see it as two things. And you can also argue it's like, is it a sale thing? Is it like kind of with the big four of thrash where it's just the biggest bands where it should be Exodus, but it's like, what would you put there? Is it like Sabbath, Electric Wizard, Sleep, Candlemass? You know, there's so many directions you can go with this, but it just felt so wrong having Black Sabbath in there and then like next to like Candlemass, next to Trouble. You know, it just doesn't really fit. But I say there's two of them like that. I think there's the big four of like pretty much like the origins of Doom bands doing that sound, and then like the late 70s, early 80s of we are centering our entire sound around doom metal. Where Under My Thumb too is like by like that first single from Pentagram, it just or I think that's the second, but it has that proto metal element to it, but it wasn't really until the 80s where they became like a solidified doom band, like even Sub Basement, which is like, this is not a rock album. This is a doom metal record. But yeah, did you guys consider like doing a list of proto metal? Like what was your mindset with that, where instead of going the proto metal direction, you went in like the more traditional doom direction?
Back in my head, I've always had, the proto metal kind of floating around in its own ether, so to speak. And I think a lot of that, I don't even think anybody anticipated them being in the doom family, so to speak, until the so-called doom scene was a little bit more well established in the late 80s and 90s. And then looking back, and I guess that's one thing about doom metal is it is very much more all-encompassing than a lot of the other, than like thrash and everything else, where as long as you've got a good thick riff, they have no problem welcoming you in, into the doom circle. So, I think it was accidentally found out, or later on they decided, well, these have the characteristics of doom, so we'll call it proto doom or whatever label you want to throw on it. But it wasn't until later on that it was like, yeah, Sir Lord Baltimore, definitely. Blue Cheer, you can make an argument for. Captain Beyond was thrown in there. All those kind of bands too. So yeah, if you want to talk specifically, proto, you could go on forever. I mean, you could really find an argument for a number of bands to fit that slot. So I've always had just kind of a bunch of bands floating around, nothing distinct, but they feature the characteristics of what we've all come to. And to me, it's always been about the riff and the pace, because I can't remember, this is way back on the old Hell Ride forums. People really would talk about how that song Black Sabbath established the aesthetics of being, true doom, so to speak. It was the slow pace. It was the thick ringing riffs and the atmosphere that was created. I mean, from the second you drop the needle and you hear the rain and the church bells, I mean, you are put right there in that spot and you're gone. So anything that comes close to that is in that vibe. You can easily pull that under the doom umbrella.
Totally. Yeah, there's so many bands like that back in the day. High Tide is another one that's just so unbelievably heavy. And I'm not sure if you guys know Bodkin, but they're a Scottish band from 1970, and their self-titled record is like a goat head on like a cross on fire. Like the most doom metal imagery imaginable. And then you have a song like Plastic Man on there, where it's like, this is Black Sabbath. This sounds like something that could have potentially been on like, the debut, or maybe with like, a little more refined and heavy with Tony's guitar tone, could have easily been on like Paranoid, maybe not as good, but it's still an excellent song. And it's like, it's so crazy because we're looking at, the UK, we're looking at the US, Japan, Scotland. It's so spread out, doom metal even today. It's a wild genre. Now another thing I feel like that I considered was like the new wave of British heavy metal. I find there's a lot of doom in that. You have Pagan Altar, you have Witchfinder General. You could potentially do like a big four of the new wave of British heavy metal doom. it's in every it's doom is kind of in a lot of metal genres. I'm not sure if there's like thrash doom,
Right.
but
Dream Death.
Yeah,
they thrashed. I'll make an argument
true.
for Goathorn too. Goathorn thrashed and doomed out quite a bit too.
Yeah, it's like it's a genre that weirdly enough you can like find everywhere. There's doom death, there's blackened doom, there's funeral doom. Like there's I can't even name them all. There's so many. Stoner doom, epic doom, like there's so many good bands. Like it's so unbelievable.
I think one of the biggest things that one of the reasons, there's so, we people like us, people that are really into music, know about all these old 70s proto metal bands. I think one of the problems we have when we talk about that whole thing and the influence that it had is that when you take a look at it, I mean, there was very, very limited success outside of Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. Once you start it, for as far as like heavy goes, I mean, you had like Sabbath, Purple, and Heap. Conceivably, you could talk about Zeppelin as far as like the four bands that were probably the biggest influencers of early metal. But when you start getting into like, it's like you get into like numerous arguments when you start talking about Blue Cheer because they were only really heavy for a record and a half or so, or a band like Mountain that had a couple of heavy songs, but then the rest of the records could meander a bit. And then some of the bands like Captain Beyond would do like one record that was killer, then the next record that was good but not really heavy, or bands that only did one record, or bands that were, like the stuff like Bodkin and Iron Claw and all this stuff that kind of came out years down the road when people were going back looking for, trying to find different, here's this thing that no one's heard. Like that, like a lot of this stuff had no effect at the time. It's like a retrospect kind of thing. It's like now it's influencing bands, whereas in the 70s, no one knew who, other than the big, some of these bands had major, Captain Beyond was on a big label. Budgie was big and super heavy, like next to Sabbath, probably the heaviest band of their day until Priest. I mean, like crushing riffs. But once you get outside of like the major label kind of bands, like no one really knew who. I mean, you could argue about Blue Oyster Cult, like lyrically and sonically, some of it, but then they meander off and they'd be doing pop here and blues there. And so it's like, it's such a mixed bag, the proto metal thing. It's hard to narrow it down.
Yeah, it is. And especially with proto doom as well, because Budgie like did get some success and they're a lot more popular than some of these other bands I did put in my like big four of like maybe accidental initial doom, but I just don't really find their music depressing. It's just kind of like fun, like heavy music. Same with like Sir Lord Baltimore and like Blue Cheer, where I don't feel this like element of doom, and it doesn't really cover those like lyrical elements as well. I feel like doom metal, there's a lot of politics, a lot of death and religious themes, and just like themes of dread, where I feel like just even the name Budgie, it's the band's name after a bird, where yeah, I don't know. I think it's tough. I think a lot of people like, I think maybe, how do you think about this? Do you think there's almost like a big four of doom in every decade? Because in the 90s, that's where like I would maybe put Cathedral. There's maybe like a big four of the 90s. And yeah, you can even like where I would put Cathedral with like potentially like Sleep and Electric Wizard, which might be a little controversial because people might say, oh, well, no, it's stoner doom and stoner doom shouldn't touch, traditional doom and stuff. But I feel like Cathedral works, like Anthrax and the big four of thrash, like kind of new metal,
Yeah.
You have elements of, you have people rapping in that band.
Even Later Day Cathedral got a little more on the progressive side too. So if you
Sure.
separate that era of Cathedral into a different category too. Yeah, I mean, Doom can be, while all encompassing, extremely expansive too. So there's,
Right.
I think out of all the genres, the parameters on Doom are just huge.
Yeah.
You know,
And
as somebody that has a label called Black Doomba Records, um, so I get asked in interviews a lot, well, okay, tell us what is Doom, because you own so supposedly you would know something about it. And I go, well, so what I try to do when I started the label, one of the first things I did is have a compilation. I sat down and decided that Doom is an umbrella of different styles. And like you said, like we all said, there's a funeral doom and this kind of doom and stoner doom, and there's all these different. So I was kind of envisioning this umbrella, and the end of all the little pokers, you hang a little sticker that says, funeral, stoner, traditional, da da da, and you could mix and match these. They could even be together. Usually, only about two of them though. So what I try to do is have a compilation album. I call it Doombanomicon. And what I did is I got 13 bands to represent 13 different styles of doom metal and be on this compilation. It was a killer little set. It was a double. I had two different variants for the A record and the B record. And I made that thing. Today the 18th. Happy birthday to Black Doomba Records. Today is 7 years.
oh, that's awesome. What a great way to celebrate.
Well, number 7, so I didn't really think about it much, But yeah, January 18th. That album didn't come out then, but that's right about now is when it came out. So what I'm pointing out though is I still have 3 copies of that. It took that long to sell it, and nobody got it. I mean, I tried to explain it, and like reviews were just saying, what is this weird compilation and whatever. And nobody really got the point of the album was to show different bands that had different versions of Doom. And to a lot of people, it just seemed like a bunch of different bands. I even had an ambient thing close the whole album out. That was one guy and just droning. And so I was saying, this is drone, dooming. I felt like droning style or ambient droning was, yeah, I think it's a legit style. I'm not listening to it all the time, but I think it's legit. I think there's a pocket for it. Yeah, so exactly. And this guy was doing kind of that. So we closed out the album with that. Second song of the album was Doomstress, which is a new wave of British metal. They're doom, but they have a lot of Budgie's a good thing, but they're kind of a new wave British metal sounding thing. But there were other bands in there too, like that. Oh God, I love them. They were more traditional. They were from England. Nobody hardly ever heard of them, I don't think. As a matter of fact, I called them up. That's how I got stock. I called the guy. I found one of them. And I said, so do you have any CDs left over from 10 years ago when you broke up? And he goes, yeah, they're all under my bed. I said, I think I can do something with them. I said, I just love your band. I don't know if anybody in the world knows who in the hell you are, but I said, I don't even know if I can sell this, but I got to get some kind of stock here to start this thing off that I'm starting. So I just bought I think I gave him what came to about 50 cents a copy. And I got it. And then I got a distribution deal that included Europe and some brick and mortar stores in England. And I sold it out. Wow. The band hadn't existed in 10 years. They're not even speaking to each other. They're not even playing anywhere. And I was like, I don't know how or why that sold out. I was like, I wish I knew why, but it did. And there wasn't a lot of copies. It was like, I don't remember honestly, but they just flat out, sold it to me, and I resold it basically with it. But I got it in the stores, which doesn't necessarily mean this is a lesson I learned. Just because your band is out, you're on a label and all that, and just because you can get on distribution, be put in a store in Italy and Japan, all that, doesn't mean anybody there knows who in the hell you are. Right. That doesn't mean you're going to sell a single copy. So I learned, I got a whole lot of copies shipped back to me or destroyed because I thought if I distributed and then promoted over there, it just cost a lot and nobody sold anything. And I went, okay, I'm not doing that like that again. You have to have a following there before I put the albums there. I don't know how I'm gonna make that happen, but so that became a thing. But what the hell was I talking about?
Well, you mentioned that compilation where
Yeah,
it's like the different styles, and I feel
describe
like
the different
you have to
styles.
really be a Doom fan to understand that. Because
Yeah,
if you're just like even just like a normal metalhead and you're into metal, even hearing something like that, I feel like it might all just kind of bleed into each other, and it's like, oh, it's
but
just
the
all the
bands
same
themselves.
song.
Now I've had several bands on the label in the last year or so that are all a little different than each other, but they have a overall sound that has apparently become the sound of the label in recent. I think it's funny that all four of these artists that were the last four I put out say that they are not doom metal. And I go, but you're on the label that says, I said you're doom metal. I said, but I understand that you think you're heavy psych and that you think you're just a rock band. And this other one over here, they go, we're just a hard rock band. And I go, yeah, but you're a hard rock band that sounds like a hard rock band from 1970 that could be construed as now. You can take a piece of taffy from then till now and stretch it real slow over time, and it became you. So you're blue collar hard rock on the one hand. You could have sold yourself that way, but honestly, a lot of people, and they play at all the doom metal festivals, and they play, they're known as doom metal. So I think these bands all do fall under doom metal categories, but I know that some of them prefer to be, and they're right. One of them, they are heavy psych, but if you got to use 10 words to describe 10 hashtags, you couldn't just say heavy psych, psychedelic rock and stop. You'd have to also add stoner doom, blah, blah, blah. Because like you said, lyrical content. One of the bands I'm talking about is Black Moon Cult, and one of their songs is Stoned Ape, based on Stoned Ape theory, which is about that apes ate mushrooms and DNA developed into us. And I go, well, that's doom drug stuff. I mean, even if it's, if you hear the first part of it is this long intro that's very psychedelic, but then it goes into almost like a thrash thing. But overall, I think it's under the umbrella of doom.
Definitely, yeah.
No matter how it comes out, Stoned Ape, and then they have the other stuff that is, they have other songs that have nods to H.P. Lovecraft lore. Well, the name of their album is Ophidian Future, The Children of Yig, which is Lovecraftian. So I go, well, you're talking doom stuff there.
Definitely.
So I think it's doom. I think it's doom, but I can see them stretching out later and maybe changing a little bit. They've got a long way. They just started, so they might turn into other things as they go. But right now, I think their album was doom. But same thing. Like I said, it's an umbrella, and there's different styles, so you can mix and match them. That's why I think it's so hard to pigeonhole a band. Hey, there's stuff on Trouble. There's stuff on Psalm 9 that sounds like a typical thrash band.
Right. It's so funny because everything you're saying, if you talk to like a band like, Metallica, Exodus, they're like, oh yeah, we're thrash metal. It's not like they're like, well, no, we're speed. We're technically like heavy metal / speed / this. You never have to argue their genre. I feel like with doom metal, there's so many examples of like doom musicians being like, oh, we're not funeral doom, we're this doom, or we're this kind of doom. And I feel like even the musicians don't even fucking know about this, like don't understand this genre,
I always say the guys in the band are the last ones to know what they are. I think the audience knows what they are. You're just doing your thing, whatever that is. You tell me what to call it.
Yeah, I'm just a nerd. That's my problem,
I think part of the problem, especially with doom, is, and this goes to your point about could you have a big four like in different decades? I mean, doom is, if you look at it, it's almost cyclical in a way. Like you'll have a flurry of bands that are kind of like in the 80s, people knew who Trouble and Candlemass were and St. Vitus, and then things kind of died down a little bit, and then you had in the 90s, there's it bumped up a little bit. Cathedral was out there, with Solitude Eternus, and Candlemass into the 90s, but it would kind of like go in these waves. That it would die down, and then in the late 90s, the activity got really big again. Stoner rock was getting really big. When Caius came out, and on that side of things, as Stoner rock was getting big, it was pulling the doom in with, and there's a ton of activity, like from like
sludge metal too.
Yeah, like from like 98 through like the early 2000s. There was a lot going on, tons of new bands, festivals everywhere, and then it just kind of goes like this. And I think the thing with doom is that when you get associated with it, no, I don't think anyone wants to be pigeonholed into doing one thing. And I think because doom fans in a lot of ways can have a very strict sense of what is doom. If you read some of these, you go to some of these, the old forums and stuff, like there was some people are very rigid about it. And I think like, as a band that, for the stuff we did in Argus, we kind of came out through the doom scene, but we weren't never really considered a doom band, but we people are going to write what they're going to write. But it's like, then you get a couple records in and we're writing more up-tempo stuff. And it's like, well, these guys aren't that doomy anymore. Well, we never set out to be. And there's a lot of bands that never set out to be a doom band per se, but you get painted with the brush, or you get popular because of it. You feel like, and it's such a marginal genre in a way, surprisingly, for the biggest, arguably the biggest metal band of all time is a doom metal band. And yet the bands that directly, were created from it and that sound the most like it are usually like the most commercially unsuccessful. It's the weirdest thing to me that people love Sabbath, but then you get a band like Trouble that was making records that were killer. Why the self-titled record from 1990 wasn't huge is beyond me. It had everything you would want. Punchy, well-written songs, great riffing, the diverse, but I can never figure it out.
Yeah, even these like proto doom bands that started around Black Sabbath, like nothing. Like literally on Spotify, even today, some of them have like 90 monthly listeners. It's just so crazy to me. And I think there are eras where it was just not good to be a doom band. Like the new wave of British heavy metal, you have Witchfinder General, which if they started, around like God, it's so interesting because I feel like when these bands put out debut records and get started is like that could have a massive impact on how they're perceived in doom metal, in the doom metal genre. Pagan Altar also is a great example of that, where it's like, okay, are we calling them, is that just a new genre of doom now? New wave of British doom metal? Is that what we call them? Because yeah, they're new album, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend they aren't doom metal bands. Like Witchfinder General, you have everything. You have the lyrics, you have the bad singer, you have the riffs. It's everything you would expect in a doom metal band. The cover, like every box is checked off. You have that speed, which we later see with like, later kind of like later 70s Sabbath with Sabotage stuff, and even like Children of the Grave. You just because it's fast necessarily doesn't like completely not make it doom, right? I find Witchfinder General to be a doom metal band. I think
they're definitely doom. I mean, and they were definitely a big influence on a lot of doom metal bands. I just think it was one of those things they just didn't have a big success. I mean, say, Angel Witch is pretty doomy too. I don't really consider it. A lot of people throw them into the doom box. Mm-hmm. There's a reference to Trouble there.
Yeah.
But I don't find them to be as doomy, but again, like they only did that one, they did a couple things that were the one big record, and then they kind of like lineup kind of like went through the changes and stuff, and their music changed by the time they got to Screaming and Bleeding, Frontal Assault and stuff. So they kind of never they didn't stay on the same path. And Witchfinder General wasn't around long enough, and you probably make an argument that those record covers probably didn't do them any favors in terms of getting shelf space in record stores. And like you said about Z Parks' voice is an acquired taste. I mean, he's not even he's like sub, he's got that Ozzy kind of vibe without having Ozzy's like actual like singing. I mean, I like Z Parks. I like what he does. Like he
I
gets
love
the
him.
mood
Yeah.
across. Same with like Rieger's in St. Vitus. Like technically, I don't think he's as good a singer as Wino is. Like I like Wino's voice actually better, but Rieger's voice fits Vitus
Rieger
so
is
much
Vitus.
better than Wino's does because it's just like this bleak, like psychotic
Despair.
kind of vibe. And same with like Zeeb and Witchfinder General. It just fit the music, but it wasn't commercial enough at the time. Like you weren't going to put that across on the radio. Whereas, you got like what was going on in the wave of British heavy metal, like with the singers, like Joe, Bruce Dickinson or Joe Elliott or whoever you had at the time. Even Deano was, I think, more commercial than like Z Parks was. So it's a weird thing. Like Doom, I don't know. It doesn't. You have to. It's such a unhappy. Even though it brings joy, like it really does. Like it's because it's cathartic. It doesn't like really reach across like in the way that you would hope it would.
Well, yeah, with Witchfinder General, it has this like Bailoff feel to it, where it's just like some dude. It's almost like an Exodus equivalent of doom metal, where it has like this speed and rawness to it. And that cover, this was what, 82? This was when like the Tipper Gore stuff was going on. Like fucking no way that's going on the shelf. No way some kids, some parents going to let their kid bring that home. Like just such an insane cover, but it has this like cult like status because of it, which is such a Doom thing, to have that cultness to it. It's just a classic. There's so many good bands. There's so many good hidden gems in this genre, more than maybe any other like metal genre. With like death metal, you have like the main big ones, and there's a ton of them. But with doom metal, when people think of like the big ones, it's like, okay, Electric Wizard, Sleep, Cathedral, Candlemass. It's like kind of like 10 bands. With death metal, thrash metal, it's like, oh my God, it's like, who are the big 30?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with doom metal, we're talking like a way longer timeline.
I was just
from technically 69 to like, and it's like, yeah, there's like 10 bands that are notable, but I think there's like way, 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 way more. But on a surface level, if you're just like a general, like surface level metal listener and you kind of dabble with doom, that's how you perceive it, which is just so like, I don't know. It's kind of tragic.
Yeah, it's tough because it brings us to the point again of the commercial success that there's been in Doom it's like this circle, right? So or cycle. I mean, if you're not selling a lot of records and if you're not bringing in, going back to the days like where you really, it's always been, I think, that you've had to tour to build a following. But so if you're not building a following, like you don't build a following, you're not selling records and you can't tour, your bands just don't last as long. So you have a bunch of bands that come out and do like a couple records and then they're gone because you can't sustain after a while. After a while, you have to go back to doing your regular jobs, or you might sustain, but your output is like, let's look at a band like Orodruin in Rochester. They've had what, 2 full lengths out and then a few
little singles,
singles and stuff, and it's like it's all spread out over years, going over 20 years now. There's only so much you can do if you don't have the kind of like the machine behind you to keep it moving along. And then in the meantime, there's bands that just come out, they make records that are like influential to a point, but then they disappear because you can't maintain. Revelation came out, did a couple, and then they, luckily they came back years later. But it's tough. I mean, you can only do so much with nothing coming in to. Hopefully, people would do it for the love of the music, and I think in this genre more than any other, if you're playing Doom, you're not doing it for fashion's sake. You're doing it for the love of the music because there is no financial reward doing this.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I know. I'm the same. I'm not. I'm doing this because I like doing it. It's the cherry on the cake for my day, and it's just I don't really. I'm sponsoring several festivals this year. It's because I like going. It's something my wife and I go and do together. We pack up all the Black Doomba stuff, and we take it to various festivals. Maryland Nights of Doom is coming up. Tampa Doom and Gloom is November. I'm signed up for like 6, but 2 of them hadn't confirmed everything yet. But yeah, nobody's coming and playing at these things or even being at these things because there's some kind of big bags of money waiting for them or anything. Everybody just likes doing it. I do it because I enjoy it. Like I said, it's something for the festivals. It's something me and my wife enjoy doing together. She gets to come too. And you know, when I'm out walking around like handing out candy and whatever I'm doing, I do that actually. When I go around with a bucket with candy and CDs and whatever, little trinkets and condoms and whatever. I go around talking to people, handing out stickers of all the bands on the label, whatever. And she's back there. I come back in an hour and I go, "Hey, anybody pick anything up?" She said, "Well, we had a guy buy this album." So I'm like, we do okay. We do okay. We make it work. It's a break even thing. You know, as long as it's pretty close to break even, I'm going to keep making music no matter what happens to me. I'm just going to keep doing it. I just happened to look up to see what AI said about subgenres of doom metal. It gave me 11.
Sounds about right.
There has to be more. It seems like there's a new one every month at this rate.
Yeah.
Blackened.
Well, I mean, you can break it down with 3 words and start having like a progressive doom vampiric metal or
Viking doom.
Viking.
well, I feel like
post-metal Viking atmospheric sludge.
Yeah.
They had was nautical doom.
Nautical doom.
Nautical doom.
Nautical
well,
doom.
I haven't seen pirate doom yet. There is a pirate metal thing out there.
Yeah.
I need a pirate doom band on this label.
That's a market that needs to be scratched. Tommy.
Yeah, man.
Hopefully someone's watching this with a fuzz pedal and thinks, you know what, I'm going to be the first.
Yeah, man. Yo ho ho. I'm gonna start talking pirate. So ye pirates. I get a whole lot, but I want to one of your points. A lot of people I get pitched pretty much daily, and I'm a label that's only going to take in about 10 bands max all year, but I'll see 1 to 5 unreleased albums and hear them daily, and a lot of them never come out at all. So at the end of the year, I've heard probably 250 out, who knows, and I've listened to every bit of it. But what happens is all the bands try. I say, well, I'm looking for, and I'll start saying the 5 things I always say or whatever. And they'll say, really, they're a black metal band, but we have doom elements. And then there'll be a crust punk band that's really kind of a death / crust / thrash band. And they say, well, there's some doom elements. And so a lot of them are trying to sell themselves to the label as having doom elements. Therefore, I should sign them. I understand why they're wanting to say that, but since I only taken this many, it has to be easily identifiable as what fits on the label. So a lot of the time I'll send them links to like the 3 bands who have done the best on the label, like one song of each of 3 albums. I go, do you sound like that? If you do, then talk to me, because those bands worked, and that's what I'm doing. Whatever you want to make of it. If you don't sound like that, then I'm not signing you, because they go, well, I say, keep in touch. You made a fan today. I did like the album. I'm just not, I personally, in my network, I'm not going to be able to sell that album like you want it to be sold. You will do better on another label, and I'll even give them a name or two of another label and say, why don't you try so-and-so and so-and-so. They're doing that.
I think you're right, Tommy, to speak to what you're saying about doom elements. I think more so in this genre than any, it's easily available for people to pick out those Doom elements and then welcome them into the Doom family. Because I mean, Butch, how many times have you and I said "Strange Ways"? That's Kiss's Doom song.
Yeah.
Or so many people will say "Rock-a-Rolla." That's Judas Priest's Doom album. You know, because it has more of those closely knit elements of
Going Blind, Kiss. That's like,
yeah, exactly. So I think that alone allows a lot more music to be put under that umbrella that we keep talking about.
Yeah.
Under that Doom umbrella, because they do have those elements.
Yeah.
And a lot of.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we said before, I think, that a lot of the bands out there that have an album that we consider to be a Doom band, and then they have one or two songs on that album that are just straight up, they're not really Doom. They're
right.
It is a happy-go-lucky rock song celebrating driving your car down the street. It's, it sounds more like Slow Ride than it does the rest of their album. So then are they Doom, or are they just, a lot of the proto albums are like that. You'll hear two songs and they're like, that's just killer. You get the second song, you go, oh my God, where have I been? And then you get the third song, and I'm like, what's up with this?
Yeah.
I like the song, but why is it in that band? I guess they got happy that day.
I think something interesting to say about doom metal too, and not to sound pretentious, but it kind of does feel like a lifestyle, where a lot of these people, like I've met so many doom bands, and a lot of them, it's like, oh, you're totally a doom metal musician. Like there's a lot of boxes that are checked off, but at the same time, I feel like with their music, it's very like, it hasn't really gone too far out there. Where you look at death metal, and we're talking like a genre in the late 80s, early 90s. Nowadays, people are making death metal songs about SpongeBob and just crazy shit. There's like all these meme bands now. Like doom metal doesn't really have that. And when they do, it's like weed worship, which is just what Sabbath was doing with Sweetleaf. There's never a point where it like really is just way out there. I feel like it's stayed in this like steady stream. And even though you get like funeral doom, epic doom, all these other elements, they do fall under like this one path instead of just going real crazy out there. So it's such a cool genre. I think with the big four, I kind of believe the whole why Exodus should be in the big four. It's like kind of the bands that were inspirational, that were important. Also at the same time that were like doing it way, way early. And that's kind of where I fall under with the proto doom stuff with my initial like big four. But then of course, with the big four, if you could maybe call it the second wave of doom metal or even the first, but yeah, just extremely influential bands and just good stuff. And I think let's wrap this thing up. Plenty of great doom talk, some awesome bands discussed here. Thank you guys for being on the podcast. Really appreciate all of you being here.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you guys. Thank all of you. I learned something every time I do this.
Yeah, check out For the Sake of Heaviness, your show on YouTube. Pretty awesome stuff. Also, Black Doomba Records.
Yeah.
If you're watching this, you like doom metal. If you're listening to this, you're obviously into the genre. Check out Tommy Stewart's label. There's some excellent stuff on there. Really good stuff. I was listening to your band too, Direwolf, today. It's just excellent material.
Thanks.
Let the Sky Fall. Great song.
Oh no, really? Yeah, that was my transition song because I had just lost my former drummer, but luckily I'd been taking drum lessons for a couple of years. And I was just about to get a new drummer, which I now have. We've been recording the next album. So Let the Sky Fall was one I did myself. That's me on drums. That's
fantastic.
Me. Direwolf is just not even a two-piece. That's just me doing everything.
Excellent.
Good for you, Tommy. That came out really good.
Trying to find a drummer. So yeah, I've got some new stuff, man. I can't wait till people hear it.
You're like a Joe Hasselvander. You're just doing everything. Like sub bass. You did every instrument.
Everybody asks me, how can I my band's not making any money, or I'm not making any money. I go, the best thing you can do is diversify your talents. And there's a lot of stuff you can do besides just play your guitar.
Yeah.
Or become a TikTok influencer, apparently.
Yeah. You can
seems to be the move by a lot of thrash.
There's a lot of things you can do when you get into music. You can have podcasts, you can give lessons, you can put on festivals, there's a lot of ways to be in music. always have to be in a band. And those people are, they're just, to me, it's all kind of, we're all coworkers.
Right.
It's kind of how I think of it. We're all coworkers. We'll all meet one day. See, we did. Targets.
Tom,
we met
one day in the big weed leaf in the sky, but hey, this was awesome. This was a ton of fun. Thank you guys again. I'm Brandon Battick, and this has been Disturbing the Priest.
It's death. I've just seen death.